This is the Mind Body Detox Podcast, where we discuss all things integrative health and wellness, interviewing folks from all over the world, sharing insights and wisdom for how to live a healthier life in mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Integrative Intuitive Medium, Kara Lovehart, and today we're going to be diving into the topic of autoimmune disease, and specifically a lot of times the long road that you travel to get diagnosed with these particular illnesses. And we'll be interviewing Rissa Miller, and she is an editor, an author, an herbalist, a seer, and a storyteller, and a longtime instructor at Firefly Hollow. She's taught many classes with us at Firefly, and we'll be speaking specifically on ulcerative colitis. That is her journey and her road to healing that. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rissa, and I first want to just kind of introduce her and a little bit share about her background in general for some of the other things she offers, because in case you have not been locally to our classes with Rissa, I just want to kind of dive into that before we go into your story, Rissa, because I think that's part of maybe what maybe has led you also to this particular path. So tell me a little bit about your background as an author and herbalist, and also a tea leaf reader. You work with many different modalities other than just tea leaf reading, but tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, first, Kara, thanks so much for having me. This is a long anticipated podcast for both of us. So in the beginning, I grew up with herbs. My mom had a huge herb garden. And, I remember being a little girl and my mom took me to a place in Connecticut. And there was a woman who had shared my full name, which is Rissa. And she was in her 70s back then. I was maybe like 5 or 6. And I can still remember she lived in a cottage with all these herbs and she made tea and she had bees and cats, and I was like, this is the life I dream of. I mean, she was in a little witchy cottage growing herbs, and I remember looking at the other Narissa's life and thinking, this is the dream right here. So I haven't quite achieved that dream yet. I took a lot of side paths. I got a degree in photography, another degree in photojournalism. I learned literature. I learned, nutrition. I studied nutrition as well. And I studied botanical medicine, so botany applied to herbalism. So I've gone to a lot of college and I've done a lot of learning. I do love education. I think it's so important to keep learning no matter what. Even if what you're learning is, I don't know, macrame, keep learning. So that said, I have always been passionate about plants. They have been part of my journey since day one. I'm a tea leaf reader. I taught myself starting at age 16, quite by accident. My mom got me loose leaf tea. Now I'm 49. Yeah, that's right. 49. So when I was 16, loose tea was like a really rare, fancy thing that you only saw on like British TV shows on the BBC, right? So it was such a special gift. And it came with this sort of crappy metal tea ball that broke the first time I used it. And they're still crappy to this day. You would think they had made great improvements, but no. So when the tea went into my cup loose, I was like, I'm drinking it anyway. I'm not wasting this. It's too precious, right? So I drank it and it started sticking to the inside of the cup, as tea does. And I said to my mom, well, that looks like a cat and that looks like a basket of flowers. And she said, that is a form of divination. You should see what else you see. I'm also a third generation tarot reader. So I have divination in my background my whole life. I still have my grandma's tarot cards. I should have thought to get them out. I would have shown them on camera, but I forgot. That said, I started teaching myself how to see symbols in a teacup, and then I had to figure out what they meant. So that took several more years of self-teaching and intuition and basically my own learning of the art form. So I still offer that to this day. And my journalism background led me into also a love of history. I actually love using history to understand the edges of our stories. So basically things like superstitions and why we cling to them as a society, even though most people would tell you they're not superstitious or, oh, I'm not a believer. I bet they actually are. Or they still practice things like birthday candles that are all about superstition. And actually, birthday candles go back to the goddess Artemis and worship of her. So that said, that's a little bit about me. And I'm going to hand it back to you.
So Rissa is like always full of knowledge. So just in that little intro, you can kind of get a little bit of a slice of that, and that's why I love you. I love chatting with you. I love learning from you, and your caliber of teaching and any sort of information you ever bring forth is always over the top in like it's high standard, high quality, really deeply thought out and just organized. And like you come forwardly feeling like you learned so much value from you. So that's why I'm really curious today to learn from your journey in your own health journey, because a lot of times we might be interested in more of the mental aspect of learning and education, and sometimes we forget our bodies. And so I'm curious, along your journey, were you a curious and contemplative little girl, and then did you have a journey in having to, as a Pisces, right? I know you're a Pisces, right?
I
I
am.
feel like this spiritual world that, Pisces, we sometimes like it reside in. How did your body come into play as far as working with it? Was it something that until you had some symptoms that you went down this path that you had to start to look at more of the physical health in your life, or how did that unfold for you with this diagnosis?
All right. So I am going to take you back 30 years, literally 30 years this year. And I was 19. And I would say I was beginning the path away from myself around that time. So I did not have the most pleasant high school experience. I went to high school locally in York, Pennsylvania, and I was different. Let's say it like that. I was not like the other students, and a lot of people did not really understand me. Most people don't even understand themselves, never mind having compassion for someone who's unlike them. So I mean, I had friends, some of the people I still talk to, but it wasn't a good time, and, I was definitely one of those kids that got made fun of and picked on a lot. Uh, and I was really creative, I was very different, so, nah, it just was a bad time. So coming out of that, I had spent a lot of years repressing who I am, repressing myself, not being me. And at 19, I was living in New York City, which was also not me. I went to NYU, which was a huge academic achievement. I had a 4.0. I did very well there, but living in New York City and it was not a good match. I learned a lot. It was a great school for education. I would never say anything bad about NYU itself. However, living in New York City and me, not a match. It was just another step into my journey of non authenticity. And as I kept pulling away and away and away from who I actually am, I was sick a lot. And when I was sick a lot, at first it was just like I had a lot of colds, or I had a lot of earaches, or sore throat all the time, or I was just fatigued for no reason. And I used to be involved in dance, so being fatigued was a real problem when you're a dancer. I just wasn't happy with myself. I didn't feel good about who I was. I didn't feel good about the things I was doing aside from my schoolwork, right? So when I first got sick with ulcerative colitis, it manifested in the way it usually does in the beginning, as really hmm, uncontrollable diarrhea. I'm going to be very blunt. The ulcerative colitis is not a pretty autoimmune disorder. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis affect the GI tract. They are inflammatory conditions. They can indeed cause complications to end your life. They themselves generally don't, but through dehydration, your heart can stop. And that was a part of my journey too. So that came later. But that said, they are socially isolating. So when you're already not being yourself and you have a disorder that's socially isolating you, it gets worse because you feel like you don't want to get too far from the bathroom. And you also don't want to have to explain to anybody why you have to go to the bathroom literally 20 to 30 times a day, which is a lot. And it's embarrassing. And your body hurts, like your whole torso. The pain is really intense. So in full disclosure, I've never had kids, mostly because of the ulcerative colitis. It's genetic, and I didn't want to pass it on, and I felt strongly about that my whole life. So that said, I have talked to women who have Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, and who said the pain from those diseases can compare to the pain of childbirth because it is that bad when you literally start to get bleeding ulcers inside of your gut. So with Crohn's, it can happen anywhere from your mouth to your anus. And with ulcerative colitis, it is just in the colon and rectum. So I hate to say this, but in some ways I'm lucky that I don't have Crohn's, but which is awful, but true. In other ways, it's kind of like when you have ulcerative colitis, they immediately want to just take out your colon. So I wasn't immediately diagnosed. I went to some doctors, and the first thing they told me was that it was all in my head. I'm like, honestly, no, it's in the toilet. Like, I'm pretty sure I wasn't imagining it. They said that I was under too much stress, too much pressure, and that I needed to just take it easy, which was probably also true, but not helpful. And so I didn't have another, what I later learned was a flare up for a while. And then the next one that came was much, much worse. I mean, it was much more serious. And I even spent like a minute in the hospital just to get stabilized. And they said at that time, they think it might be Crohn's disease, but they weren't sure. I had never heard of Crohn's disease. There was no Google. The only way to do research was to go to the library or just trust whatever vague information your doctor had. So at that moment, they didn't even have a pamphlet on what that was. On inflammatory bowel disease, nothing, not even a leaflet. So, of course, my parents were extremely upset and anxious. We went to see the only gastroenterologist available in York at that time, in York, PA. And he was not the best. I'm sure that he had his merits, but I can tell you, when I walked into his office, all of his plants were dead. And I immediately looked around and said to my mom, here I am talking to the plants again. I was like, I don't think this man can help me. And she's like, well, he's the only game in town. I said, Mom, he can't keep a pothos alive. Like, how is he going to help me? And, but he was the only game in town. So I had literally no choice. And then we got into his private office, and he had nothing on the walls except pictures of himself. So I was like, once again, I don't think he can help me. So he met with us for just a few minutes. He's like, look, I'm going to go ahead and diagnose you with Crohn's disease. I'm going to tell you to quit college. I'm going to say that you're probably not going to live another 10 years. You should just, move home and wait to die. That was not what I expected to hear. I sat there. My mother was crying. And I said, is there anything that anybody can do to help? I was like, is there anybody at all? Is there anything you can do to change? And he was like, we could put you on this drug or that drug. He's like, we could remove your colon. And I was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. He pushed for that surgery. I still have my colon, by the way. And now, like all these years later, my mom and dad were like, maybe you should consider it. And I was like, nope, not going to do it. I will die intact if I die. And so then he said, there's a dietitian at the hospital. Maybe she can help you, but probably not. I was like, well, I'm going to turn over every rock. Let's do that. So I went to see the dietitian at the hospital, and she, for whatever reason, the night before had finished reading a book by a medical doctor named John McDougall. And he supported a plant-based diet for people with autoimmune because it has anti-inflammatory action. Now, I had always wanted to be a vegetarian. I was kind of mostly a vegetarian, which is not a fully plant-based diet. Vegetarian does include dairy, eggs, and honey. And some vegetarians eat gelatin and some don't. So that said, I was like, I'm on board with this idea. I was like, I know nothing about what it means to be vegan or fully plant-based, but I'm willing to give it a try. I was like, it sounds way better than losing my colon. And back then you had to order books. You had to go to a bookstore and order it and wait to get it. So the week and a half it took to get John McDougall MD's book, I was like on pins and needles. And in the meantime, they gave me a drug that is used a lot. And I think probably too heavily, because people even use it in like cats. I don't know why, called prednisone. So prednisone is a very potent anti-inflammatory. You probably have crossed paths with them. Yeah. And in emergency use, like I was in, yeah, it makes sense. But long-term, it has a lot of side effects. I mean, if you read, it even can cause schizophrenia. I was like, who wants this side effect? I don't need this. It did have a very severe side effect. In my case, it made my vision go completely blurry to the point that everything looked white and all I could see were like shadows. For somebody who wanted to also study photography, that was not okay. Also wanted to read or drive or watch television. I couldn't do any of those things. I didn't have a computer at home yet, so that wasn't a factor. But I couldn't take care of myself because of the prednisone. Losing your vision in that way is a moment that definitely gives you time in your head. Because if you can't see the world around you at all and you're used to that, it changes your perspective deeply. So I went to see the registered dietitian, and she said, well, she gave me the book, and so when I got the book, I couldn't read it. My wonderful grandmother, who passed right before COVID got really bad, she read the book to me. She came down and to my parents' house and sat with me and read the book. And then I had a couple of friends, local friends, who would come and sit with me through this really difficult transition period where I got used to thinking that this was my body now. I was never going to live in the same body again because it would always have this autoimmune disorder. And I was going to have to learn to care for it in a new way. So I started dosing myself off prednisone, which is not advisable to your listeners. This is not a thing you should do. You should always, for legal reasons, you should always follow your medical doctor's directions. But I did not, because I wanted to be able to see again. And I started dosing myself down. And between that and the transition into the plant-based diet, which wasn't just a plant-based diet, I'm going to be clear. It included no sugar, and except for moderate amounts of fruit, no table salt, and no processed fats. So like fats from almonds or avocado were fine, but I wasn't using like Crisco or any kind of cooking oil or like spray oil or anything like that. And there was zero processed food in this diet, period. So it was truly a whole foods plant-based diet. And when I say whole foods, I mean like actual whole food, not the store.
No boxes.
Right. Exactly. It included things like learning to cook stuff from scratch that I had never done in my life because I was very young and I had either had my mom cook for me or I'd eaten in the cafeteria up until that point. So, I mean, I could make little things, but this was a big change. So I learned to cook at my grandmother's side. As my vision came back, I learned knife skills. I learned how to prepare a lot of vegetables. First, I had to eat everything cooked. Raw foods did not work when I was in a flare. My body had flushed out all the enzymes, probably needed to digest them. I'm great with raw foods now, to be clear. And for somebody with colitis, that is almost an unheard of thing. But the diet came first. First came the unprocessed plant-based diet. And next came the herbalist. We drove a long way to take me to an herbalist, but I was insistent. I was being called to go to an herbalist. And so we found one through referral after referral. And my first prescriptions, I guess, from the herbalist were raw honey and chamomile and turmeric. And chamomile and turmeric are things that are part of my regular to this day. So that has never changed. And I am super grateful to her. I wish I remembered her or the nutritionist name because they were people that changed my life and I don't remember. But the healing had to come in stages. I did not yet understand what triggered the attack. I still thought I was just like a victim of life at that point, or a victim of my body, actually. I felt like my body betrayed me. And I know a lot of people dealing with serious physical illness feel that way. So that was my impression then too. But I knew that I believed in my soul that I could fix it naturally. I just believed it.
I love that you had that moment though when you lost your vision completely, you were seeing blurry and you were feeling like this is going to be my life now before you kind of had that glimmer of hope. It's the age-old story that catalyst that takes someone into themselves, into that healing journey, into you can't distract yourself anymore by watching things or by, listening to, you have to go within yourself. And I think a lot of times we still are outwardly focused, and especially a lot of you out there, if you have undiagnosed autoimmune conditions, or like autoimmune is one of the biggest ones that people are like, it's very hard to diagnose. And it's like, well, we don't really know what's going on. And this is how often at, not just Firefly Hollow, but other places that are integrative or functional or holistic in nature have this situation where someone's in that space. And I just want to honor not just you, Rissa, but anyone out there that's kind of in that journey where it's like there is that pivotal moment where you say, I have to take this into my own hands. And that's when your power starts to come back and you start to, I'm just already seeing this beautiful story unfold. So I just wanted to mention that. And like, I'm just curious. And that's what I said at the beginning about your, well, we don't always have that awareness of our body. Most of us, we don't have to be a Pisces, right? And we're in this space where like, okay, then the body betrays you, or you feel like it's not working for you. Like you said, so many people struggling with chronic pain or illness are doing that. But there is that moment that you go within yourself, you're not distracted enough, that you have to be with you, that this dialogue comes on, this motivation, this something that changes. And it's the recipe for transformation, I feel. So I love we're getting into the juicy parts of the story here, that you've got your herbalist and you're going forward and you're able to eat raw foods now. And so like, how did that progress then because you moved into, so much of your life now? I'm curious. It feels like so much of your life now is based on this foundational pivotal moment of who you are.
It is. And, like I said, I had always wanted to be a vegetarian because I love animals. I grew up with dogs and cats and horses and pet lizards, and I had a horse. Like I love working with animals. I love being with animals, and I didn't really like eating them, but I was told I had to. And that was a big moment for me to realize that I could actually honor my own vision and path by not having to take life to sustain mine anymore, ever again. And to this day, I have not. So, I started to realize that I went back to college. As you probably figured out in the beginning, I've been to a lot of college, and I went back to school. But I kept feeling random pain in my body. And I learned that was the canary in the coal mine. When I started getting random pain in my neck or shoulders or hips, where at the moment I still had no injuries. I do now because life. But I was like, oh, what is going on? Why is this triggering? Because then the colitis would come after. So I actually started seeing a massage therapist when I was in college, which was expensive for a college student. And I remember that he offered a deal for college kids. Like if you pay for 10, you get a significant amount off. So that's what I would do so that I could work out this pain in my body. But then, it's funny that the thing about pain is that, at least for me, is that it will just move somewhere else if I don't address what's causing it. And
Yes.
so I found out that my college offered free therapy, I think for like 15 sessions or something like that. And I was like, I wonder if this will help. And it did. I went to the school therapist each year. I used up all 15 of those sessions. And I found that a lot of the things that I wasn't addressing that had happened in my life, the bullying, I was raped when I was 14, all of these things that I had pushed under the rug and not talked about and not dealt with were causing the pain, were causing all these other things to happen. And I had to address them. I had to move forward on a healing path, or the weird random pain in my body and the colitis kept coming back. Like I had to stop in my tracks and address those things. Talk therapy was really good for me. There is something to be said for finding the right therapist. It's important.
Yeah.
Journaling also helped a lot. I have filled dozens of journals over the years. Some I kept, some I burned, but they have mattered. Working with animals has been great. I love volunteering to work with sanctuaries or walk dogs or brush horses or take care of goats or whatever. I find that the simple way animals see the world is very therapeutic for me as well. But I left college and got an amazing job that was completely wrong for me. I worked in an office at the Baltimore Sun. It was a fantastic newspaper in its day, and I did very well. I was part of an award-winning team my first year there. I had national awards to my credit. You can tell I'm also a workaholic, right?
I get it. We both got the Capricorn moon thing going on, right?
Yeah, it's one of my other
Right.
challenges. It's like a good thing, but a bad thing.
Well, I want to just mention real quick here about the autoimmune and trauma. So, bullying, rape, us going through some sort of family loss, losing a loved one, watching, domestic violence, being a victim of domestic, there's so many things. And then there's simple little things that were perceived as traumatic to us as a child or as a teenager or anytime as an adult that other people may not consider that can still be traumatizing. And that's so fascinating, the connection between that and autoimmune diseases, like unresolved. It's huge because I had this awareness when, being a medium and connecting with people when they're from a medical perspective. Why was I seeing so many women in particular that have had either a car accident or some sort of precursor to the development of fibromyalgia or lupus or some sort of autoimmune condition, and them becoming hypersensitive, empathically sensitive to their environment, sensitive to foods, this whole kind of cascade of things. Have you read The Body Keeps Score?
I have not, but the
A
title sounds
really,
perfect. Yeah.
really great book on, and there's a lot of research in there. So I highly encourage that for anyone who's looking for, information about trauma in general and healing it. But I just want to mention that connection there. And a lot of times for that start point, I think it's so important that you started the body work, because the physical body, getting aware of the body, can help discharge the trauma, but then the talk therapy is that second layer. And it's so interesting that when we're in that space of trauma, all of us, until we start to put words and language to what we've experienced through journaling and these practices, the body can't heal. The body holds on to all of it. So what you're saying is so like on point with this journey of healing. And I'm mentioning this because we don't, maybe you in the audience don't have this awareness yet or even experience this connection between what you've been having long time symptoms and things you've been holding on to. So you were saying that you got your first job and it wasn't right for you. So go ahead from there.
So I had to learn the hard way that working in an office under the pressure of multiple deadlines a day, it had been my dream for a long time, but it turned out it really wasn't right for me. And I went into a flare that was very difficult to live with, especially working in a cubicle in an office in a newspaper. Newspapers are a very fast-paced environment. I know the media takes a lot of heat now, but I can tell you firsthand, most of the journalists I have known are incredibly honest people that make almost no money and get into journalism after a lot of education because they want to support their community and do the right thing. And I have known many, many dozens of journalists that is their story. So that said, that was why I wanted to do it too. I wanted to support a community. I wanted to be part of a team that was truth telling and was doing good for a city. I just wasn't cut out for the day-to-day work. And I decided to this was really different for me at the time. I started to go to an acupuncturist, and her name was Julie, and she did acupuncture and what's it called, cupping with the glasses.
Yes, boxibustion.
That's and with the mugwort burning, the whole thing. This was all very new to me, and I really responded initially very well to the treatment, and it definitely slowed down the progression of the colitis flare up. But I realized later it was a band-aid. Because once again, I wasn't telling myself the truth that I hated the job and I wasn't cut out for the work, and I didn't know what else to do. We live in a society where we are forced into a situation that is unnatural to a lot of people, where we have to take on these roles, and it was not a good fit for me. But I did have great health insurance that paid for part of my acupuncture, and it paid for me to get a weekly massage, which was great. And I continued with that. I also, from that massage therapist, learned about Thai massage, which I was also, because I had multitask always, while I was at the newspaper, I also was dancing professionally and teaching dance. Because I can't just do one thing. I have to do five. And That said, so I was pushing myself really hard. You can tell that rest was not part of my routine. That was a lesson I had yet to learn, and it was a big one. Um, so I was doing all these other things, but I also still continued with maybe once or twice a month therapy. And I was introduced around that time to a process called EFT, emotional freedom technique, which is tapping. It's something I still use to this day, and multiple therapists have worked on it with me. I've attended online symposiums about it. I think it's a really easy, cheap, wonderful way to address a lot of deeply rooted things. And I always recommend it to people when I give readings. I'm like, get on YouTube. It is free and it is there for you. And you can take control of your own emotional healing in a much better way. And if you still need support, get support. Of course, that's why support is there. But it was a great system for me. Um, so then I got married to someone who we had a lot in common, but in the end, we communicated very differently. And I don't want to say too much more about that other than it was not the right place again for me. But for a variety of reasons, I spent, I would say, 80% of the years I was married in a flare.
Yeah. So you're still making that decision that wasn't right for you.
I was still making a decision that wasn't right for me. I did leave the newspaper. He and I started our own business, and then I also did like freelance writing and stuff on the side. We were commercial photographers. We had, in many ways, a great life. We had fantastic dogs. We had a great house. From the outside, it looked like everything should be perfect. And people always, I just started to be known as like sick Rissa. And people used to say things like, oh, you must be sick because you don't eat meat, or you must be sick because you don't do this or whatever. And it got to the point where I was so thin and debilitated for years that movement was no longer a thing that was good for me.
Yeah.
And I missed it. I missed movement so much. And then I would say the most pivotal part of what came next for me was the homeopath.
Wow.
So a homeopath and a vet, ironically. So let me do the vet first. I had a dog named La Crema. It's Latin for tears. And she had an amazing holistic vet. Unfortunately, he passed away during the pandemic, but he introduced me to flower essences. Now, flower essences are really good at uncovering and pulling out your emotional stuff. And I had never heard of them. I didn't know what they were, but he was using them on animals, dogs, cats, horses, rabbits. And I saw my animal respond to it. And I actually called and asked him, I was like, can I just take this too?
Yeah, because with animals, there's no placebo. It's not placebo. That's why I find people are like, oh, homeopathic. I don't know. That's so crazy. I'm like, let's think about this here, but just go ahead. There's no placebo with animals. So go ahead. I wanted to say that.
Well, also he did use acupuncture and homeopathy in his practice as well. His homeopathic treatment of all the dogs I ever took there was so fantastic compared. So he treated one of my dogs with pneumonia with homeopathy, not antibiotics. And the dog was well in 3 days. Now, after he passed, I had to take the same dog to a regular vet, and it took 2 months for the dog to fully recover from the pneumonia. There we go. That's all the evidence I personally need. I realize it's anecdotal and there was no blind study, whatever, but I saw it multiple times with my own eyes. And, if he were still around, I would take any animal to him or myself any day. But that said, the flower essences helped me realize that I still had a lot of emotional healing to do, and that there were things that maybe I wasn't facing with talk therapy that I should be. And I didn't stay in it constantly. I would go in and out because there were times when I just kind of needed a break. And I started seeing a homeopath as well. And her name is Dr. Emily Telfar. She is still in practice. She did homeopathy, craniosacral, which is also super fascinating treatment. And she also did chakra balancing. And I stayed with her for probably 10 years. She would have a gentle way of leading you into your truth. And the homeopathy, the flower essences, the craniosacral, where the chakras were and weren't working, all of that spoke in a way that no other treatment ever had. And I will always be grateful to her. I feel like she saved my life literally because and also in Maryland, naturopaths can order medical tests and things like that, which in Pennsylvania I don't think that's the case. But in Pennsylvania we can order our own medical tests. So that said, I had to become a lot more honest with myself about who I was and how I was literally sabotaging my own life. So I did go through a divorce. I did go through some really bumpy years in my own personal healing. But then, and you lose friends too. I want to say that because it matters. When you have friends who were friends with a version of you that wasn't real, it's okay to let them go. It hurts, but it's okay to let them go because they weren't really friends with you. They were friends with some made up character that was not you to begin with. And there were people I still miss, but they have nothing in common with me as I am now. And it's okay. It's okay. And I do wish them well. I wish them great happiness and well-being in every way. And I will always be grateful for the time I had and shared with them. But sometimes you have to let go of one thing in order to make room for something new. And I also along the way I studied feng shui, and that's a lot about letting go. That's a lot of letting go. You have to be willing to let go in feng shui to make room for what's coming, and it's a super fascinating and sometimes difficult process. But it's one of those processes, like any of these ones I mentioned, that is ongoing, and you keep learning about it as you go, as you are immersed in it. So this did lead me, of course, to finish my herbal studies, which I had started back when it was called Thai Sophia, back now
Yes.
Merit Integrative. Yeah, I started at Thai Sophia. I dropped out of their master's program, and then I eventually finished at Chestnut School, and I took other classes at Herbal Academy in New England. So I always knew that plants were part of my path. It's kind of my dream to go to the Bach School in England one day for their 3-month program, but leaving for 3 months is a lot. So I haven't been able to sort that out yet, but it's on my list. And I think one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle for me was learning that I would never heal my body until I healed my mind, spirit, and emotions. Those things were that had to happen. And it was it was decades before I learned that. It was decades. And I truly believed that there must be a supplement or a treatment or something that would fix me, but that was never the case. All of those things were there to support me, even the prednisone. It was just something to support me so that I could figure out my own way. And I think that's one of the biggest fallacies of Western medicine is that a pill will save you or a procedure will save you. You have to save yourself. There's just no other way. You cannot hand that responsibility or the honor of caring for your body off to another person. You just cannot. Other people can support you. Doctors and nurses can support you. A veterinarian or a vet tech can support your animal. Your animal can support you. You can support each other. That's a great system. Plants can support you. Energy work can support you. Crystals can support you, but none of them are going to fix you. You have to do it yourself. And I'm sitting here on the other side, and I'm not saying that my colitis will never come back. That would be silly and a lie for me to believe it's not possible. And you know, I have to do the work on myself every single day. I have to be truthful. And there are moments when I still hesitate. It even happened this morning, Kara. I was posting something on Facebook. And even though the algorithms are slow, and most of the people who follow me now on Facebook are people who actually really like and know me, I was like, oh, I wonder what people think about this thing that I'm posting. And then I was like, but who cares? If they don't want to be friends with me on Facebook, let them go. Let them go. Let them go do their own thing. If they're going to say something nasty, I'm going to take them off my account anyway because I don't need that. Um, all of that said, I really think that every piece of this journey was critical, even the suffering, even the 20 times a day in the bathroom, even the internal bleeding. All of it was a critical part of my path. And I still follow a plant-based diet to this day. I still eat very little processed sugar. I don't add salt to my food. I do very little processed food. Um, I do some, especially if I'm in a hurry. But you know what? If I'm really busy and I'm eating a lot of processed food, I don't feel good. I start to get mind fog. I start to slow down. I need more rest. I literally start to get weird aches and pains. There they are. The weird aches and pains in my body come back. And all of those things are singing to me, like, you shouldn't do this. You need to take better care. I am active again. I ride a bike. I love going for hikes. I do dance videos at home. I never went back to a dance class. Maybe someday. But all of that said, movement has returned to me. Enjoyment of living in my body has returned to me. Because I am now 49 years old, I added weight training into my schedule to, keep my skeleton in good shape. All of these things are things I could not have done at the height of being sick for a decade. And I did also go back to talk therapy, and part of the treatment was the trauma from being sick so long. I was treated for PTSD for being sick for 10 years and thinking I could never leave the bathroom. Yeah. So I will say one thing, ulcerative colitis is easier in some ways because, when I first got it, there were no cell phones, there were no laptops. You had to sit in the bathroom by yourself. And now you can sit in the bathroom and scroll through
And
Instagram.
avoid going into
Yeah,
yourself. Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can watch a show on YouTube or Netflix. All of these things make the hours in the bathroom pass more quickly in some ways. I still love reading. I always suggest to people, have you tried reading? But something simple is just trying to read one book every month or every 2 months is a great break for your eyes and your brain, and can be a very healing thing as well.
Rissa, your story is really our collective story as healers. If you're out there and you're listening to this and you're kind of embarking on this journey where you're looking for other alternatives, and of course that's why you're listening to this podcast. So like this is the journey. So you specifically, it is different for everybody, right? It is so unique, and it is that call to something has to change. And the one thing that shifts, there's something within the self that shifts, and it's I have to do this. And there's some part of the self that has some little glimmer of self-love, of self-respect, of some sort of motivation. And it has to be from that motivation, because much of our motivation to not do that in the first place is we've been taught that we just go to our doctor to tell us what to do. But then there's also a collective programming of not loving ourselves, not being enough, not feeling enough, that we don't actually think about ourselves in a highlighted sense of like we are enough, and that we deserve to look at ourselves, be gentle with our emotions, be gentle with our bodies, what we eat it, what we feed it, whatever. And this is interesting because this is like what you've walked us through is the foundation of the Mind Body Detox program. As a healer, we all have to go on our own little hero's journey, right? How do we figure out where we have to figure this out, and we have to do this and that? And I know that after everyone, when they kind of return from their hero's journey, they then maybe can contribute to their community with their wisdom and the things they've learned. And that was kind of my journey through Mind Body Detox. How do we create a system for going within, finding your own answers? It can't be cookie cutter. Everyone's like, oh, I want to join your Mind Body Detox program. And what's going to happen? I'm like, it's very unique. And it's just like your story. It's this, how do we do some self-inquiry, looking at the energy field, looking at the emotions, looking at even just lab tests as well, like this whole full spectrum approach. And I love that as your journey unfolded, you started with body work, like that physical piece. That's a lot of people start there with massage for pain, and until they maybe meet someone in the massage industry that has more of a holistic, edge, and then they kind of direct them more to other services or things that might support them. But as individuals kind of go along their journey, especially people who are sensitive, they do end up to more things, like you said, your homeopath that was working with the chakra balancing and was working with the flower essences. The more we seem to clear out the gunk, the heaviness of our story, the heaviness of our trauma, and start listening to the body, we start to become more responsive to subtle shifts with subtle medicine, like plants, like herbs. We don't have to take these things that are moving a stagnant energy field. So that's what I see when people are really sick or they're really into the mainstream way of living. And there's no judgment about this because people are very hardy people. Earth signs, specifically in astrology, earth sign people, the Taurus, the Capricorn, and the Taurus, the Capricorn, and why can't I think the other signs? Um,
Virgo.
Virgo. I mean, they tend to get their own health problems, but like people who are very much in that personality, they tend to be more skeptical of these types of things. They're not as open-minded, right? But they're also ones that can be more resilient. But I find that we all have, to one degree or another, this underlying story that does illustrate the biography of who we are that becomes what our body does. And I think that's really interesting to see more and more people that are interested in learning more about this and wanting to go on their own journey, but they still want the answers from these medical providers of like what is the right way. And I think it's not going to ever be the right way. And I want to share, you were talking about when you eat foods that you don't feel so good, you feel sluggish, you feel during this podcast, everyone, I had to do I've been eating this way from my own journey, a similar journey to yours, where we had to find our own way and figure out what to do and what our body and nervous system wants. I couldn't do gluten. So I have been gluten-free for 10 years, other than a couple accidental ingestions. And I had to do a test this week, and I had to eat gluten yesterday. And I have been like this whole like yesterday and today, my brain fog. I'm stumbling on words. You guys should have heard the bloopers of me trying to pronounce ulcerative colitis today. And the beginning of our podcast, I'm like, I can't even do this. But I wanted to share with what you said about not listening to your authentic self and what that part of the journey is, because that really is, in a nutshell, everything that this healing journey is about loving the self. And if you're not really seeing who you are, it's not loving the self. If you're trying to be someone else, it's not loving the self. If you're not living the passion and purpose of what you want to be doing, that's not loving the self in a deeper way of loving. And I will reflect, Rissa, the last 4 years since COVID for us, for our organization, I am going to confirm what you're saying from my own experience and what I've seen in other people. When you're not living what you want to be doing, you're not living in your truth, you will start to get sick. Rissa actually know this. I have been getting sick very frequently over the last couple years. And because for our journey, for our organization, we lost people over the period of COVID, and they were all administrative staff people. And so I had to step into those roles, which is not what I love. It's not my passion. It's not what I'm here to do. And slowly knowing, it's very interesting knowing it and having a conscious awareness of, I'm starting to get these symptoms. I'm starting to get sick all the time. I know I'm not living in my joy. I know I don't want to be doing this, but knowing and hearing from spirit that I have to keep moving forward. Now that's like completely almost dissipated. We're pretty much back that Kara can do what she wants to do and what she loves. And as my body's starting to heal, but I just want to confirm that. So if you're out there and you're listening to this story, my affirmation too, for my own experience and seeing others, if you're not really feeling passionate or living your truth, you're going to have some symptoms that start to creep up over time. And that is something that internal journey, exploring your emotions, exploring working with different practitioners, healing trauma or emotional things, or even just how your diet and how you're treating your body is so much like this is if you had to give someone a roadmap, everyone's roadmap is different, but the milestones are the same. It's going within the self. It's looking at following these breadcrumbs to different types of practitioners. What feels right for you intuitively, physically, spiritually? What is it? And growing from there. And then you get to the end of it, right? And you're not really at the end. There's still different things you do and learn, right? There's no end. There's no finish line. But that third stage is you're here to now teach others. You're here to share your message. And anyone out there that's on this journey, please share your message. Please, like Rissa and all the other guests on this, share this episode, but share this message, because there are people out that don't feel like they have a choice. And they don't feel that maybe the way I'm doing it, we have to step into our truth. Like people that you're not friends with anymore. Like you said, you move away from a lifestyle and an old person that you were, that really wasn't truly who you are. And there is a lot of people out there living in that. And when they're living in this space of wearing masks and not truly expressing who they are, there is a level of not being able to be open sometimes to some of these things that are not socially normal right now or yet. But it takes people talking about it and saying, this worked for me.
I love this word, Kara, normalize. Normalize acupuncture, normalize Reiki, normalize going to an herbalist, normalize all of these things. In fact, all of them are way older than allopathic medicine, and we have survived on them for millennia before there was. I'm not saying anything that if you need antibiotics, you should take them. If you have a broken bone, go to a doctor. If you fall and hurt yourself, go to a doctor. But all of these things for long-term treatment and for healing, deep emotional healing, unfortunately, there's no pill for that. So the other thing, I was listening to you talk, and I was remembering something that my naturopath said to me. And when I was in the midst of my long-term colitis flare-up through most of my 30s, she said, "Can you look at the mirror and look at your stomach, at your abdomen, and say, 'I love you'?" I could not do it. I could not do it. I mostly wanted to say, "How could you? I hate you." And when I went back to her again the next week, she's like, "What can we find that you could start to look at yourself, at this piece of my body right here, from here to here,
Yeah.
more positively?" And all I could come up with was, "Thank you," or
Mm.
I appreciate you today." And it took me a while to even grow into those. And I actually, as a practice, every morning I look at my bare abdomen and give myself a high five in the mirror, on the mirror, and I say, "I love you. You work so hard. I appreciate you, and I'm grateful for you." And it's I mean it now, but it took me a long time to get there, because that was the part of my body that I didn't understand why it was betraying me. It wasn't betraying me. It was sending an alarm to me. And the less I listened to the alarm, the louder the alarm system got. So I, it wasn't the colon's fault. It was me.
Yeah.
But yes, it took me a long time to be able to look at my stomach and say, "I love you."
That's huge. Some people can't even look in their own eyes and say that to themselves or even accept a compliment from someone else. And that's like very foundational for the work that we do. That work that I do privately with our program is like this, how do we embrace love in a deeper way? And some of those are the steps to it. But I found it really interesting over the years. We talked about autoimmune and connection to autoimmune and trauma, but there's even more interesting layer of this underlying psychospiritual self-hatred that is carried in the consciousness of people that I work with from a medical intuitive perspective, that is this correlation with autoimmune. And interesting that immune system's meant to protect us from invaders. But when it's turning against itself, against yourself, versus not everyone out there. I mean, you could still hate other people and have hatred and anger and disappointment and all those things and judgments, whatever. But more so, that's usually a reflection of how you feel about yourself. Usually, the more you judge others, the more you judge yourself. The more you hate others, there's more deep self-hatred. It is always a reflection of your own consciousness. And when people, yeah, right. And when people are unaware of that, where are you not loving yourself? And not to go, oh my God, I'm so horrible that I'm not loving myself, because that's perpetuating the not loving myself. But I think that to me has been so prevalent in every single client I've worked with that has had some sort of a diagnosed or undiagnosed potential autoimmune condition. And I think there's absolutely so many tools to use and modalities and mainstream and holistic together, but it's this journey to self-love. That's the healing. And I love that you are every day on a daily basis high-fiving yourself in the mirror. That's amazing.
The other phrase I use, and Kara, I give this phrase to a lot of the people I do readings for, because a lot of people I read for, whether I'm reading tea or smoke or tarot or crystals, what I'm looking at is that they're self-sabotaging their happiness or their well-being or their family or their job or whatever. So the phrase I like to use for myself and that I like to give to others is, when I loved myself enough. When I loved myself enough, I decided to get up early enough to prepare a healthy breakfast. When I loved myself enough, I went for a walk instead of looking at my phone during my break. When I loved myself enough, I decided to quit the bad job and find a new one. When I loved myself enough. And this resonates deeply with almost everybody I say it to. And, I'm almost positive that it's a title of a book that I saw on Oprah in the 90s, but I don't know that for sure. I think so. But yeah, I don't think I came up with it on my own. But I wish I could credit the author right now, but I can't. That said, when I love myself enough, I stopped overcrowding my schedule. When I loved myself enough, I realized when I needed rest. All of these things are things that apply.
Yeah. I love that you're saying it as a story in past tense, because even if we've never even done it, it still creates a story of a possibility and giving us a jumping point.
The stories we tell ourselves is a huge thing. Come from a storyteller. The stories we tell ourselves as a society, as individuals, as a planet of people, we tell ourselves a lot of stories, and some of them are valuable, and some of them are not. And I would say this is a great story and a great beginning for anybody who is on a healing journey. They can start their story with, "When I love myself enough." It's almost better than "Once upon a time."
Yeah. So my final question here, I usually ask everyone on their first time on the show. I have 2 questions that I ask. So the first question is, if you could detox your life right now, your life or the world right now from anything, what would you detox it from?
Wow, that's a good question. What's the word I'm looking for? Lack of compassion. Is there a word that means that? I feel like there's just not a lot of compassion for ourselves or for others in the world right now. There's a lot of intolerance. There it is. There's a lot
Yeah.
of intolerance. I would detox the world from intolerance, which at the root is fear, I think.
Yeah.
But some fear has its place. That's the reason we feel it. When we were simpler humans and we had to run from a bear, fear was important. But now we just fear each other. We fear ourselves. We fear our own success. We feel our own failure.
Mhm.
This fear creates this heaviness for everyone living on the planet,
Mhm.
including our animals who are sicker than ever. And it just lays on all of us like this gray, wet blanket of pain. And that is underneath the pain and the fear, underneath all of the intolerance that's happening in the world for ourselves and for each other. That's what I would detox the world from.
I love it. Thank you. So I completely agree. And I think that I want to just share that sometimes we are in fear and we have a hard time getting out of it. I have a lot of people, especially if they're a helper, healer person, they want to not be fearful. They want to not have these like moments where they break down or they get scared or they get angry or whatever. I would say, that's another space to say, be gentle with yourself and love yourself, because this is a journey of the collective. I think that's why when we go on these healing journeys, like we'll call it our little hero's healing journey, right? And then we're still on it, right? It's just in different areas, healing our body, healing our mind, healing our spirit. When we do it, it's nice. It's kind of like in the Matrix where you take the red pill, the blue pill, you're like, take it. You're like, I'm now aware of myself. I'm now aware of where I need to heal. And I'm overgrowing and expanding my consciousness. And now I'm more aware of these things. Wow. So it doesn't stop. It doesn't end. But I think it's beautiful when we have the awareness of us doing that work. It reflects and ripples out to the collective. And that's where, to not be, to be gentle with yourself. If you get in spaces of fear, that we're riding the wave of the collective going through their fears too. And if we can ripple out more love and loving ourselves more, we can really make huge change. I know it sounds like so small, but it's not. It's so not, because then you have someone like yourself coming on the show from the love, that little step of self-love. You're going through and you've had your journey. You went through this dark night and you come out, and now you help how many people you're helping now with your readings and with how much you've written about vegan. You were working for a vegan.
Well, I did. I did that for 5 years. I was a senior editor of a national vegan magazine.
Yes. Yeah. And so that helps people. Like so much of what you are still living and still do, the motivation behind your purpose. And this is why people move from their job to a purpose. It's not work, it's purpose. And that's, I think you and I are both in that. And I love it. You can't get enough of it. Like, we can't get enough of learning and growing and expanding. And you tap into a life force that never ends, which is knowledge and wisdom and expansion and consciousness. And it's like, what better? How could it get any better than this? Why not? So join us, guys. Do your healing work. Join it. It's scary, but you got other people that can continue to inspire you along this path.
I think it's important to, if you're on a healing journey, it's okay to ask for help. We're kind of taught not to do that. We're taught we have to be self-reliant, do everything on our own, and if you want something done right, do it yourself. Okay, but also when you need help, it's okay to ask.
Yeah, I just asked a lot of help recently. 4 years of we just did a podcast last year. It's been a year, I think, anniversary from our burnout podcast. And as I'm doing the podcast, I'm like, Allie, I know I'm burned out. I don't have a choice. And a lot of healthcare workers and other people, that this great resignation, they had a lot of administrative staff in many organizations that, like, it's all on my shoulders now. There's no one else, or we have to hire, or no one's wanting to work. There's this whole story. This is a collective thing. I'm not alone. I'm not feeling victimized like it's only me. I'm like, I know. And I said during that podcast, I said, I'm aware of this, but what do you do about it? And you do self-care, you continue to do, you can do all that stuff, but there's only so much self-care you can do. It's not reasonable or sustainable to do 4 people's jobs. So right at all for anybody. And I think that with the collective moving in this space of, we need to have healing. I think it's interesting to watch. I was just talking to some other healthcare workers that are burned out, and I'm kind of thinking to myself how much of a blessing this might be, because even COVID didn't stop people. Even COVID didn't force people to shut down and look within themselves and do this healing work that we've done, because, you were on the toilet, I was in bed in pain, and I couldn't go out of the house because I couldn't turn my psychic skill stuff down, and I was seeing ghosts everywhere, and I was drained, and I was sensitive to all this food, and nothing except being put flat out on your back sometimes will stop us. And if burnout is the way for our culture, bring it, because we need it. The animals, like you said, the plants, everybody, the world, we need to stop, and we need to heal. So I wouldn't wish ill in the world, but burnout, if that's what's got to happen, I mean, it's already happening anyway. So yeah. My final question that I ask, and usually, since I still have my gluten brain from taking this gluten to do my test tomorrow, I usually ask the questions in a different order. Usually that question's the last one. But the other question that I ask is going to be the last one for today. It is there any particular product, book, any sort of podcast, or anything that's a resource that you really love right now, that you're absolutely in love with? It could be a food, it could be a product, it could be a person, it could be something that's really lighting up your life right now that you just can't get enough of, that's supporting your journey.
So I'm going to answer this in the way that is most authentic to me at the moment. There have been a lot of people and books that have influenced my path as I've gone, but I have 2 things I've been enjoying a lot. A YouTube channel called Minopan Tarot. This guy named Chris Reck out of California does weekly tarot readings, and I always listen to both the Pisces and the Capricorn one, and I have really enjoyed him. He's quirky, he's funny, he's really honest. He is not a sugary sweet tarot reader. And apparently other people like that because he has over 100,000 followers. And the other thing I have spent a lot of time with lately is raw crystals. The kind that are not polished or cut, that are just like big chunks of beautiful crystals straight out of the earth. And I have found them to be inspiring in a very different way and have a very different beauty than my polished crystals. So those are the 2 things that I'll say have been moving me lately.
Awesome. Thank you. I love to hear that. And everyone has something different and unique. I'm always like, what are you really into right now? What's supporting your healing journey? So yeah. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us, Rissa, how we can find out more about you, more about your work? Anything else that we didn't cover you want to touch on?
I have two websites where people can find me. The first is Tea and Smoke, and that covers my readings, my tea leaf readings, smoke readings, tarot readings, crystal readings. And also, I promote on there all of the various classes that I'm teaching. You can hire me to teach a class for you. And then I also do ghost tours. So my website for that is hauntedpa.online. And I did just launch quietly. I tell ghost stories on YouTube as well on Listen to Me in the Dark.
Cool. Thank you. I'll put all those links in the show notes. That's so exciting. And of course, you guys follow her and go and to really dive into the resources of her websites and the YouTube channel and all the things, because there is you're going to get a lot out of everything that comes out of your mouth, Rissa. You learn something new. So yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Rissa, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Kara. It was absolutely a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And we appreciate you all, guys. And again, be well until next time, my friends. Thank you for listening to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. If you loved this podcast, share it with others and leave us a review. Your reviews help us more than you know and supports us continuing to make episodes and being heard from all over the world. You can also follow the link in our show notes to submit a topic that you would like to hear on the show.